Welcome back, everybody. I'm Julie Banderas. Time now for Sunday House Call.
And I'm Marc. Welcome. Joining us as always, Dr. Marc Siegel, professor of medicine at NYU's Langone Medical Center and author of The Inner Pulse, Unlocking the Secret Code of Sickness and Health.
And Dr. David Samadi, chairman and professor of urology at Lenox Hill Hospital and chief of robotic surgery.
Doctors, good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We're going to begin this morning with some startling new revelations. Researchers call it a game changer. Has to do with lung cancer. A vaccine developed in Cuba, we're told, is on its way to our country for testing. And they say it could end up being a lifeline for patients here who are dealing with lung cancer. Dr. Siegel has the details.
With the United States beginning to change policies towards Cuba, researchers from Buffalo's Roswell Park Cancer Institute joined a delegation to Cuba led by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. They brought back Simovac, an innovative vaccine against lung cancer that could be a game changer.
The really exciting thing about this vaccine is in prevention. And we're not talking about, immunizing 5-year-old kids to prevent them from getting lung cancer. We're really talking about immunizing people that don't have lung cancer but are at very high risk to get it.
With the vaccine, you will have an improvement in your overall survival together with an improvement in your quality of life. And apart from other drugs, this is very safe.
According to researchers, the vaccine works by targeting for destruction an essential growth factor on the surface of the cancer that enables it to thrive. The vaccine is safe and cheap, only $1 a dose in Cuba. With lung cancer being the #1 cancer killer in the U.S., a lot is at stake. The vaccine must still be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, a process that may take months before doctors at Roswell Park can begin a clinical trial.
It's through this collaboration that we're going to be able to bring this vaccine to the U.S. and evaluate it and see if its potential efficacy to help patients with lung cancer or other cancers. This vaccine has implications across a number of different tumor types. It's a unique opportunity for Roswell Park and the Cubans to be able to develop this.
The Cuban researchers have other vaccines and inexpensive treatments in the works that interest Roswell Park. The international collaboration between these two institutions bodes well for the future of cancer care, and not just with lung.
That sounds pretty promising, but Dr. Siegel, why would a new lung cancer vaccine come from Cuba?
Well, first of all, Eric, this is for people that have metastatic lung cancer that's spread all over their body and they don't have any other hope. And a study that's come out of Cuba on this, looking at 5,000 Cubans, showed that 20% live 5 years with this, which is incredible for lung cancer. So that's the promise. But Dr. Lee there was saying maybe it could be used for people at a high risk of lung cancer who don't have it yet, because they may make that protein on the surface of lung cancer that this vaccine fights. Answer your question. Why Cuba? Because Cuba focuses on prevention, because they don't have a lot of money. They're trying to figure out how to stop diseases before it occurs. They made this vaccine cheap. They made it safe. $1 a dose down there. They made it safe. You have to just get a shot in your arm once a month. They've been focusing on vaccines in Cuba for a really long time for infectious diseases. So even though they're very poor, they have a lot of effort on infectious diseases and vaccines.
Okay, but this isn't necessarily a vaccine in that if you get it, it's going to prevent you from getting lung cancer, and it's not going to cure you of lung cancer.
That's exactly right. This is not for prevention. So if you get this vaccine, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get lung cancer. We're not quite there yet. So FDA still has to look into this. The research in Roswell Park Institute, the clinical trial on human, has to go through in this country to find out what's going on. About 1,000 Cubans have received this, and globally they have about 5,000 patients that have gotten this. The reason why it's coming from Cuba is because they're doing more with what they have, and they were desperate because of 55 years of embargo on them. But the Immunology Institute in Havana is actually the brilliant scientists, and they are collaborating with some cancer institute in this country, and hopefully a lot of good things that comes as a result of this. The way this would work is that the cancer cells, they have something called epithelial growth factors. Every cancer cell needs some fuel or gas in order for it to grow. What this vaccine will do is take that fuel away and slows down the process. And what they're finding out in 2007, in Journal of Clinical Oncology, they found that it increases the antibodies that reduces the tumor size. So going back to you, it's not a cure, it's not a prevention. I don't want people out there to think that I'm going to get this vaccine, I'm going to start smoking Cuban cigar and I'll be fine. But certainly there's some survival benefit. Based on some of the studies that I've seen, it adds about 6
Dr.
months.
Siegel, you talked about a trial, and you're talking about months. So when can someone, if someone right now who's watching has lung cancer, or is a loved one who suffers from lung cancer, when do you think they could benefit from this?
Eric, I have to tell you a secret. I asked him that question knowing you would ask me. So Dr. Lee says, and the head of Roswell Park up in Buffalo, who's Dr. Johnson, they say that the FDA, it's going to take 6 months for approval here, because they're not used to this. The FDA is not used to seeing a Cuban vaccine. And what do? They think they can get it approved for clinical trials in about 6 months. After that, a year or two before it will get to the doctor's office. To David's point, it's probably going to be part of an arsenal of treatments. It's just, we're going to add it to the arsenal of targeted therapies, of immune therapies, something we didn't have before. I went up there thinking, this thing has been around too long. I looked at it, I think it's promising, and it may be usable for people who are at high risk, who have that epidermal growth factor.
But they won't be able to use it until like at least next year, if not.
That's right.
So that's a good point. It's not something that, unless you go to Cuba and start like looking for the vaccine over there.
Can you do that?
Well, I'm sure you can. You
Have
pay.
people
You
done
pay.
that?
Well, I'm not sure, but I'm sure if you pay, you're going to get the vaccine.
You can.
But what's important is that we're learning from the principle of how this vaccine works and be able to apply
and how
this.
it might affect other cancers,
colon
too.
cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. And this is a very important point that you're bringing up.
You read my mind. That's what I was thinking.
So that's where we're really getting a big buck for the bank, and that's
okay.
Big bang for the buck or buck for the bank?
Bang for your
bang
buck.
for the buck.
But you know what? I got what I got.
Those are the cancers that have that epidermal growth factor.
Yeah.
Prostate, pancreas, lung, breast.
Yeah.
So
And these
overall,
are-
it's a positive news coming out of Cuba. We got something positive out of this relationship. I don't know what we're going to get out of the Iran
It's,
deal.
it's
but
ironic, as you mentioned, that they come up with the Cuban cigars,
some
and now
pistachios
Cuban
going.
cigars, and now they're coming up with a
There you
vaccination
go.
for lung cancer.
All
Isn't that
right.
interesting?
And it's fascinating. If people want to go to Cuba and try that, they can look
it's
that
a
up
deadly
too.
cancer, so any good news
Oh, yeah,
is
absolutely.
wonderful for this patient.